Well, good morning, everybody. I'm really excited that you're here today to join me on a bit of a personal journey to plan today's conference, because I think it's a long time since here in Birmingham and in the broader West Midlands that we've come together as a sector to discuss the things that I think are really important in terms of the sustainability and growth of the social economy sector. So it's going to be a great day. I've got the most amazing speakers. I've had to do a bit of arm bending to get some of the people turning up, and we've got a few people who just don't come to things normally. So I'm absolutely delighted with, the level of skill and expertise that we've been able to bring together for today's event. So without further ado, I am also very excited that I've got someone to talk to this morning, Afzal Hussain. Many of you will know him. So Afzal, would you like to come and join me? We're doing a bit of a fireside chat, because we want to kind of create an atmosphere today where you can ask questions and you can talk to people and you can explore ideas and those sorts of things. So we're going to kick off with that this morning. So here we go. I want to just introduce him, and I've done this with everybody because sometimes we don't necessarily know about the breadth of experience that the people that we're working with. So Afzal's been CEO at Witton Lodge since 2012. You studied at Aston University, which is what I did, and also worked at Birmingham City Council, which is what I did. So that's good that we've got kind of a similarity there. You're a huge champion of community-led approaches to tackle deep-seated inequalities and build flourishing communities, and you do that so well. We had a little bit of a pre-meet, particularly around building partnerships and collaboration. You're chair of Health Inequalities, Communities and Economies within the NHS, a group there. You're chair of BMET, and you're a member of the Mayor's Task Force on Homes. So we've got someone here who is really committed to the social economy and making links with key public sector organisations, but also someone who's really grown his own organisation. So I'm now going to start asking him some questions. I have shared them with him, but late. So we're going to get really honest answers, I think. So you've had quite a long journey in terms of community leadership, and it's widely respected. What early experiences shaped your commitment to community-led regeneration?
Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning. It's nice to be here and to see some familiar and friendly faces as well. And thank you for that introduction as well. I think it's very hard to kind of pinpoint kind of one thing in this. When you said you've had a long journey, that's code for kind of you're old now. And I think that's true. So I've been doing this for over kind of 3 decades. So I think without taking you through all 3 decades, I think those kind of formative kind of experiences, particularly early on, I mean, I started my working life as a volunteer. So I volunteered for the best part of the year over in Smallheath in what were then employment resource centres. But it was really my first experience of kind of skills, but done differently outside of the formal kind of educational setting. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. Prior to that, I didn't really have experience of this. I trained as an engineer. I trained as a chemical engineer, actually. But there was something just, when something kind of gets you in here and you kind of think, okay, this feels right, feels interesting, feels like there's something kind of different. So that's what really sparked my interest in, what you'd call kind of community work. And that's kind of held me in good stead. I started working for what was then Focus Housing. All of you that are old enough to remember, it's now Middle and Hart, but in what was then the Community Regeneration Unit. And then I worked for the City Council here in Coventry, and I've been at Witton Lodge. I think the thing that really sticks with me when it comes to the kind of work that we do, fundamentally, it's about what works. And I have seen this kind of day in, day out, year in, year out, that if you work with communities, genuinely if you work with the grain of communities, which is easier said than done, that you get better change, you just generally do, and you get the kind of change that sticks. So we don't always have to revisit those places and neighborhoods and communities. So I think, you know, as much as there's a kind of a moral and a value base there, which says, you know, we want people to kind of, you know, thrive and succeed, and we have deep-seated inequalities, far too many in our city, in our region, that need to be addressed. The flip side of that is that actually, if you want real change, if you want your, you know, value for money, you want to get more bang for your buck, whether you're in our sector or the public sector, you know, then working with the grain of communities, where communities have a genuine say, they have a genuine voice in shaping and delivering and owning and managing, then I think you get better results.
That's music to my ears, and I think that there's a lot of learning that can be done, particularly working cross sector, where people are often parachuting into communities and think they have the answer, but they're not working with the community in terms of really enabling change to happen in, you know, in terms of their lives. So we're in quite a time of change, aren't we? And so we do need to be listening to what people are saying, but in terms of the business and operating environment that we're working in, how do you see the role of the VCSE sector evolving, and particularly in shaping public services in the next 5 to 10 years? I mean, we've got the new Office for Impact Economy, so there's changes higher up in the system, and we've got new procurement legislation. But how do you think the VCSE sector can really sort of change things in terms of public services?
Just out of interest, how many kind of public sector folk are there in the audience? Okay. All right, so I'll caveat one. No. So look, the truth of it is, I don't think there's a kind of a magic bullet and a magic turning point. I mean, someone reminded me last week, I was at an event where we were promoting community ownership and what this government ought to do about it. And there was an MP, and he said, well, you know, David Miliband was talking about double devolution, and that's true. And I said, oh, that was about a decade ago. And he said, no, actually, it was about 20 years ago. And I was like, blimey. And that's true. Yeah. So the truth is, it's not that we haven't known what to do. It's the execution. It's a policy. It's the surrounding kind of policy, environment, resourcing. You know, that's the bit that's been kind of lacking. And so, having said that, let me park that cynicism to one side, because I think the truth of it is that if you kind of work in our sector, if you do what we do, then you are eternally kind of optimistic. I have to say, these days, I don't know whether I'm optimistic or delusional, but, you know, you just have a sense, don't you? You have a sense that you can create change, you can affect change, you can make change happen. And then we have the power to do that. And I see that, you know, all around us. I think there are reasons to be optimistic about it. If I think about the NHS, talking about neighbourhood health, you know, I mean, fundamentally, I mean, that talks to kind of connection to place. Now, what the NHS might think about as what neighbourhood is and what we might do would be very different, potentially. But nonetheless, that understanding of a connection to place and communities is starting to come through. And I think the re-emergence of place-based working, I think, is really, really important. And that's the same if you think about the DWP, if I think about local authorities, that return of kind of place-based working, I think matters. I think what really matters is geography and how we organise at that level. So this isn't about just co-location, because often we hear about, you know, we're going to join things up. So there's an element of localisation of services. So this is putting lots of people together. And then there's localism. And I think there's a difference, because localism is about kind of local stakeholders, including those from our sector, playing a very active role in determining what happens and how it happens. So look, I remain optimistic. I can see where those threads are. And as we're talking about the social economy, social enterprise, I think you think about this. I mean, you know, what's this government's number one mission? Kind of economic growth. It's what its stated mission is. I think that's true, but it's not enough. Where that growth, how that growth develops and where it lands is equally important. Far too many of our places and communities don't feel they have a stake in that. And I think we're seeing the results of that in some of the kind of other negative kind of things that are going on in society. But I remain optimistic. And I think it's up to us to come forward with positive kind of options. You know, when government says we want to do neighbourhood health, well, okay, this is what it could like. Let's kind of step in and step up to do that.
So I absolutely agree with everything you've said, but let's just take the thinking a little bit further. What do you think that local authorities need to be doing, and, you know, NHS and other public authorities need to be doing differently to enable the voices of community to come forward, to enable the changes that need to happen? What advice could we be giving them? What, you know, from your practice?
I think first is just give life to your prospectuses. You know, the things that you read. How many times have you read a document from, you know, the City Council or the Combined Authority or the NHS or the DW? And I think that makes good sense, actually. I sign up to that. Very rarely do I disagree with it. There may be kind of points, but I think, yeah, broadly speaking, this, you know, reads right. But the reading right and how it manifests itself, there's a gap between that. And I think we talk about co-production, don't we? You know, when was the last time that actually happened? Genuinely, you know, we co-produce something. And I think we've got to guard against some of the, so often, you know, folk like us in the voluntary community and social enterprise will talk about mainstream, you know, take these good ideas and adopt them. But if they're not adopted with the right kind of value base and thinking about how it lands and where the impact is felt, I think you have difficulty. Very quick example, any of you involved in social prescribing? Social prescribing. It was a thing. Yeah, Jennifer. So we were talking about the NHS. This is about how do you do prevention, really thinking about from the grassroots up, and many voluntary charities and community organisations have been doing that. But the way that the NHS adopted it is they took that idea and funded GPs to do it. I mean, you know, we want to see a GP, we love GPs, but that's not their core essence. So, you know, how it translates into kind of practical action is often the bit that's missing. What I think we can do is say to them, you know, trust us and provide ways and mechanisms of doing that. And if I can briefly mention in this city, earlier this year, we've launched something called the Birmingham Community Action Network, which are community anchor organisations like mine coming together and saying, look, often people come and say, you know, you're doing very good work in North Birmingham, that's great, but we need to think about the whole city or the whole region. So it's a way of providing a common kind of access point to saying, look, whether you want to work in Northfield, in the south of the city, or, you know, in the east, we've got, you know, a network where we can work with you. So there's a collective kind of you know, and common access point, but staying true to our values, which is about communities and neighbourhoods and localities.
So we've talked a little bit about the system and what happens around and what you have to navigate in terms of running your organisation. How do you bring innovation into your organisation?
Blimey, okay.
that wasn't on the list.
So the first thing I'd say, and sometimes people say, well, how do you do what you do? What I've seen, and there are folk in here actually, it's, the people who are kind of, I'd say, more successful, are those that are able to act in ambiguity. So when you don't still know what's going on, they're able to act, take decisions. So sometimes we have a blueprint, don't we? We have a kind of a route map or a road map. It says, do this, and do that. And actually, sometimes a compass is all you have. Yeah. And I think this is where, if you stick to your values and your principles and the things that really matter to you, and you're able to act in those moments, I think you have a way of kind of, you know, starting to kind of think about the horizon and what's coming downstream. That being said, you know, I think we need, you know, you need competence. And sometimes it's not the kind of big shouty stuff. It's genuinely, you know, what are you good at? What's your expertise? What are you known for? Yeah. Are you credible in what you're doing? Yeah. Both to the folk around you and who you're trying to work with and influence. And the truth is there's great practice everywhere. There is great practice everywhere. Oh, yeah. And actually, one of the things I love is speaking to people and kind of just seeing what they're doing. Yeah. And, you know, how do we work better together? You know, if we, because I believe, apart from the mic, I believe that to your point about innovation, I believe it thrives really in collaboration by working with people. that collaboration creates really strong networks. And those strong networks, I think, unlock bigger opportunities. And I think if we can do that systematically and regularly, then I think that's, a way of succeeding.
I'm so glad you mentioned talking to other people and learning from others. And I think that it's sometimes quite hard for leaders in the sector to get out to look at things and see how other people are approaching some of the issues that are out there, because actually we could shortcut in some ways. And also, as you say, by working collaboratively and having the discussions and then taking some ideas for a walk can get great innovation. The other bit of innovation is, I think, again, as a leader, and I mentioned to you that I wanted to ask you about this, is what's happening around us in terms of AI. So I'm reading sector reports that's saying that organisations are using AI to write tenders and for procurement opportunities. And I'm also reading that those people who are judging those tender opportunities or those grant applications are also using AI to help them market. So the AI is talking to each other. And what people are saying is that we have got, and we could be walking into a problem here, because what we're losing is the personal understanding and knowledge and the personal experience of working with organisations rather than stuff being driven by data. How are you going to manage that? But it's one for all of us.
Well, I think the first thing I say is AI, like anything else, I think it's emergent, isn't it? It's a tool. It's a tool that we have, and I think at the moment it's quite a blunt tool.
Yeah.
And so, we're kind of figuring out, what it does and do that. I think the other side of it, it's a real opportunity. I mean, so not only, my day job these days is on this side of the fence. For years when I worked at the city council and in Coventry, I was a funder. And I would say this now, wouldn't I? But there is no substitute for relationships.
No.
And knowing what you want to fund and who you want to fund. So the opportunity for all of us is surely to get out there and actually understand what we're funding, who we want to fund, and how we want to do that. And also, move away from just our kind of, 30-page application forms, because that's the truth, isn't it, really? So how can we be more creative in how we're asking for those applications and just be a bit more imaginative about doing that? Because at the end of the day, I think if we focus on what is the impact, the outcomes or impact we're trying to create, and then, I mean, these are just tools. So I think there's stuff that will come, which I think will be hugely positive, in all honesty. I mean, I just think there will. There'll be things that we're able to do that we can't even imagine that we're doing now. And for funders and ourselves, I think it's time to step into that space. Yes, guard against the kind of, the rubbish stuff, but really focus on, I think, the good things that can emerge. But underpinning all of that is, if you're a funder or an organizer, develop those relationships, and use moments and opportunities like these to network and connect.
Brilliant advice. I hope those people who are awarding contracts and grant funding will listen to that. But I think there's some work to be done to think through how we kind of navigate that, because otherwise people could be winning contracts who perhaps aren't the right people to do the work. But I haven't really said that. So I'm coming to the end, and we've got 3 quick fire questions, and I've so enjoyed this. I could carry on for another half an hour. One policy you would change tomorrow?
So locally, it would be to support community ownership. What's going on in Birmingham with the disposal and so forth, if we can do that, I think that's what's a difficult situation could turn into an opportunity.
Fantastic. One lesson all local leaders need to learn?
Oh, bloody hell. It's hard not to give a trite type answer, but I think action beats analysis, in my mind. We've got to be thoughtful in what we do, but I think the ability to act, learn and evolve, I think really, makes a big difference.
Brilliant. And one thing, this is the last question, one thing we underestimate about communities?
I think everything we underestimate. It's just fabulous. I think such an untapped reservoir of resource and energy and positivity that I think even 5-10% of that could be transformational. And I think not just for our sector, but actually as a nation to kind of flip what's going on out there. I think there's massive potential.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed that. I hope the audience have. Thank you for your time today and for kicking off our wonderful event. It's much appreciated. Can you show your appreciation?